Fortnite is still one of the biggest games in the world. That is exactly why this story matters, because when a company like Epic Games cuts more than 1,000 jobs and then says Fortnite engagement has been falling, you are no longer looking at just another ugly tech layoff. You are looking at a crack in the foundation of one of gaming's biggest empires. Epic itself says the company is spending more than it is making. Reuters reports the layoffs were tied to a drop in Fortnite engagement, and AP says the cuts amount to roughly a fifth of Epic's workforce. That is not a little trim around the edges. That is a company reaching for the brakes at highway speed. Here is the part that really stings. Epic's own memo does not try to dress this up as some elegant strategic reset. Tim Sweeney basically says the quiet part out loud. The company is laying off over 1,000 employees because the downturn in Fortnite engagement, that started in 2025, means Epic is spending significantly more than we're making. Reuters reports Epic expects to save $500 million through cuts in contracting, marketing, and open roles. That is a brutal sentence to read when your business is built around a game that once looked like an unstoppable money printer. It is not a victory lap, it is a bill coming due. And Epic does not stop there in the same memo. Sweeney says the company has had challenges delivering consistent Fortnite magic and that market conditions are the most extreme since the company's early days. He also says very plainly that the layoffs are not related to AI. So no, this is not one of those lazy corporate excuses where management blames a shiny new buzzword and hopes nobody notices the spreadsheet. This is Epic admitting that its core business is under pressure, while also admitting that the game still has to fight for attention in a market where people have more entertainment options than ever and a much shorter patience window than executives would like to admit. And then there is the timing, which is almost funny in a deeply unfunny way. Earlier this month, Epic raised V-Bucks prices and said in plain English that the cost of running Fortnite has gone up a lot and it was raising prices to help pay the bills. That line would be embarrassing coming from a small indie studio. It sounds like a company trying to convince players that Fortnite is somehow a struggling household with rent due. The point is not that the price increase automatically proves doom. The point is that Epic was already signaling cost pressure before the layoffs hit, which makes the whole thing feel less like a surprise and more like a warning flare. Then Epic started cutting off pieces of Fortnite itself. Rocket Racing, Ballistic and Festival Battle Stage are being removed, with Ballistic and Festival Battle Stage going offline on April 16, 2026, and Rocket Racing following in October 2026. Epic's own Fortnite status account says, "We've built a lot of Fortnite modes and in some cases we failed to build something awesome enough to attract and retain a large player base." That is a rare kind of corporate honesty. Usually companies dress failures up in a lot of soft nonsense about realigning priorities and focusing on the user journey. Epic just said, "The modes did not pull their weight." That is not a sign of collapse by itself, but it is a sign that the company is pruning aggressively and not every branch of the Fortnite tree gets to survive. Now, this is where the story gets interesting, because Fortnite is not falling apart in some simple obvious way. Reuters notes that Fortnite still topped US monthly active players on PlayStation and Xbox last month, but average playtime fell sharply according to Circana's Matt Piscatella. That matters. A game can still sit near the top of the charts and still be losing energy. In live service games, raw user counts are not the whole story. What matters is how long people stay, how often they return, and how much they spend once the novelty stops carrying them. And when time spent starts sliding, the warning light comes on even if the game is still technically huge. One analyst quoted by game developer took that even further, arguing that Fortnite's annual peak monthly active players across PlayStation and Xbox have dropped since 2023, while average monthly playtime has fallen from 29 hours in 2023 to 15.4 hours in 2025. Based on Ampere analysis estimates, that is not Epic's internal dashboard, so treat it as analysis rather than hard company disclosure. But if that reading is directionally right, then the picture is ugly in a very specific way. Fortnite is still massive, but it is no longer growing like an untouchable force. It is defending position. That is a very different game. And for a business built on endless momentum, defending position is where the math starts to bite. This is the part where the whole industry should pay attention, not just Fortnite fans. Reuters says Epic's layoffs are happening in a market where growth has stalled and live service games depend on a constant flow of expensive content to keep players engaged. Publishers and platform holders keep chasing the dream of a forever game. A title that becomes its own ecosystem, its own social network, its own cash machine. And then they discover the ugly truth. Once a live service game hits scale, it becomes harder and more expensive to keep it exciting than it was to build it. The revenue expectations go up, the content costs go up, the patience of players goes down. That is not a Fortnite only problem. Fortnite is just the clearest example, because everybody thought this one was different. Epic has also spent years positioning Fortnite as more than a game. It is a platform, a metaverse, a creator economy, a concert venue, a place for crossovers, branded events, user-made modes, and the whole one game to rule them all fantasy that corporate gaming people adore, because it sounds like infinite growth with a cool trailer attached. But when Epic itself says it is still early in returning to mobile, still fighting legal and platform battles, and still trying to evolve the engine beneath everything, the dream starts to look less like a stable empire and more like a very expensive construction site with fireworks on top. AP also notes that Epic is still dealing with the fallout from battles with Apple and Google that delayed its mobile recovery. That is a lot of pressure for one company to carry while also pretending everything is fine. And just to be clear, none of this means Fortnite is dead. It is not dead, it is not even close. Epic itself says Fortnite remains one of the most successful games in the world. That is the key phrase. Successful, not invincible, not immune, not permanently blessed by the gods of live service. Successful. There is a difference. And this story is basically a reminder that success and safety are not the same thing. A giant game can still hit a wall. A giant company can still make bad bets. A giant brand can still discover that the era of effortless domination has an expiration date. So here is the real takeaway. This does not look like Epic is simply cleaning house after a bad quarter. It looks like a company admitting that the Fortnite machine has become harder to feed, harder to scale, and harder to justify at the size it was built for. Maybe Epic comes out of this leaner and sharper. Maybe the next wave of Fortnite content reignites the audience. Maybe the mobile push and Unreal Engine strategy eventually pay off. Epic clearly wants you to believe that, but if you're looking at the shape of the story, the price hikes, the mode shutdowns, the falling engagement, and the layoffs all point in the same direction. Fortnite is still huge. The problem is that huge no longer means untouchable, and for Epic that is the real nightmare. If you enjoyed this breakdown, hit like, subscribe, and stick around for the next one, because gaming's biggest companies keep revealing just how fragile success can be when the growth slows down. Thanks for watching and goodbye.